Space. A ceaseless void lacking everything life needs to survive. A harsh vacuum, insane temperature fluctuations, radiation that will unwind the very atoms we are made of. It is by design a place that will kill us, the antithesis to the fabric of being. And yet, we went there anyway, because space may be inhospitable, but humans are so relentlessly, inconveniently curious. When we found everything around us, where else to go but up? There's a small subset of science fiction films that attempt to be as realistic as possible in their portrayal of science. Typically called hard science fiction, I believe they are rooted firmly by the contemporary ideology associated with them. In this essay, I'm going to examine some of these films, the imagined future they present to us, and the ideology of the environment they were made in to seek a better understanding of the sorts of environments that these movies flourish in. And to finish, I'm going to attempt to answer the question of where have these sorts of movies gone, and why are they less prevalent now? But first, what is ideology, and what do I mean by it? An ideology, to put it simply, is defined as the set of beliefs characteristic of a social group or individual. Ideology can be understood in the way that the dominant ideology of a population is a shared set of beliefs, the status quo for example. In Ian Scott's American Politics in Hollywood Film, he states, no, not all films are political, but they are all ideological. In this, he is referring to how films are produced in certain cultures and either conform to the dominant ideology of that culture, or make an active attempt to challenge it. Every film in some way will be influenced by the dominant ideology of where it is made. However, sometimes this can happen unconsciously. People may not realize the ideological systems they are working under and the biases they have when making the films. You can figure out whether a film is conforming to or challenging the dominant ideology by asking yourself which type of characters and behaviors the movie is using to portray as good and wants you to resonate with, and which ones it doesn't. In Neil Blomkamp's Elysium, a neglectful factory manager forces Max, played by Matt Damon, to climb into a radioactive heater to fix it or lose his job. It inevitably goes wrong. He gets radiation poisoning, loses his job anyway, and sets off the events of the rest of the film. The filmmakers make an active effort for us to see this factory manager and the system of managers and CEOs that he is working under as neglectful to human life and only interested in profits at any expense. This signals to the audience their ideology. In Jeff King and Tanya Krasinski's book, Science Fiction Cinema from Outer Space to Cyberspace, they state, science fiction films can be seen to some extent as measures of the hopes and fears of the cultures in which the films are produced and consumed, and this is nowhere more apparent than in Elysium. Neil Blomkamp said in an interview with The Telegraph referring to the issues raised in the film, people have asked me if I think this is what will happen in 104 years, but this isn't science fiction. This is today. This is now. In terms of space travel, Elysium is not very hopeful. It is 2154, and all that has been achieved is the rich have run off into a large ring orbiting Earth. And while space flight between the utopian ring and dystopian planet isn't too difficult, humans have not ventured any further out at all. This imagined future is not hopeful. But how would you picture space travel at a time before we had launched anything out of our atmosphere? To illustrate this point, let's go all the way back. No wait, not that far back. It's the early 50s, there are rising tensions between America and Russia, the Hollywood studio system is beginning to crumble, and in the pictures is Irvin Pichel's Destination Moon. Pichel's movie depicts a realistic interpretation of a manned mission to the moon, 19 years before we actually achieved it, 7 years before the first satellite launched, and 8 years before NASA was even founded. Contemporary views towards space travel in the early 50s is tricky. While science fiction media had existed for a while, it wasn't until the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that the genre really took off. Until the decade of the 50s, there was essentially no market for science fiction books at all, wrote author Robert Silverberg. He argues that the 50s was a real golden age for the genre in writing. One such book was The Conquest of Space. Released in 1949, written by Willie Lee and illustrated by Chelsea Bonstall, it exposed many Americans to the prospects of space and space travel. It was widely read and displayed extensive illustrations and descriptions of the planets of our solar system based on the latest information. This book was a sensation that provided all ages with not only near photographic drawings of planets and their surfaces, but fundamental maths detailing things like escape velocities and orbits. This is the environment Destination Moon was releasing into, one ripe full of a new set of people learning and discovering the wonders of space, while simultaneously stock full of fears of the continual rising tensions of the Cold War. The movie makes short of a grounded respect for science, and is one of the first science fiction films to do so. To do this, producer George Pell hired a real astronomical artist and a real rocketeer, Sobchak notes in their 1997 essay. That astronomical artist being Chelsea Bonstall, the same Bonstall who had illustrated The Conquest of Space a year earlier. The imagined future Destination Moon presents is one optimistic about an expansionist future, a future where technology, science, and corporations work together to discover beautiful imagery and explore places we never had before. It is full of hope and pride for the American future, which aligns perfectly with the dominant ideology at the time. Even when cautionary, it celebrated technology as progressive and the American future as expansive in awesome and poetic displays of graceful glittering new machinery and startlingly beautiful extraterrestrial landscapes. The Americans were at the forefront of this expansion, and nothing was going to stop them. Sobchak then points out that the events of the film revealed the extremely optimistic belief that man and science, and the machinery dependent on both, could indeed conquer the stars. And 19 years later we did exactly that, and in a scene eerily similar to the one of the movie, the flag of America is firmly planted in lunar soil. But what about now? While it is interesting to view a movie in hindsight after we achieved what it hypothesized, wouldn't it be interesting if we had a more modern sci-fi movie providing us for an imagined future that we haven't reached yet? Ridley Scott's The Martian shares a lot with Destination Moon. As of the writing of this essay, we have not yet sent humans to Mars, and it feels like a feat far from our time. But what sort of imagined future does it present to us? The Martian follows astronaut Mark Watney, played by Matt Damon, as he gets stranded on Mars when a catastrophic storm causes his fellow astronauts to presume him dead and evacuate. In this, we are presented with 3 storylines. Mark's as he attempts to plan his way off Mars, the team back on Earth as they discover Mark's survival and start an effort to retrieve him, and the other astronauts who learn about his survival and go back to get him. It is through these storylines that we get told a future full of improvised science, international cooperation, and hope. Midway through the movie, when the supply probe NASA attempts to send Mark promptly explodes, the China China National Space Administration step in with an experimental booster, allowing the team to make new plans that ultimately end up in Mark's rescue. And similarly to Destination Moon, the closest thing the movie gets to villain is space itself. Ideologically, we're being presented with a united planet that works together in the name of scientific advancement. There are no bad guys, only people wanting to rescue another person. Conflict is then created by the insurmountable odds of surviving in outer space, and even then, Ridley Scott was still hesitant to make Mars seem truly evil. I wanted to make Mars out to be very, very beautiful, if only because we really don't know what it's like for people. The movie is scarily scientifically accurate, with its one major mishap being the size and strength of the storm at the start of the movie. This scientific accuracy is mostly credited to the writer of the book 4 years prior, Andy Weir. Every time you see Mark talking about anything scientific, I have to do all the maths, and this scientific accuracy is truly astounding. Everything in the movie seems plausible. It is hard science fiction as pure as it comes. The messaging of the movie seems to link with the dominant ideology of the time as well. A 2010 research paper conducted by Pew Research Center found that 63% of Americans believed that astronauts would land on Mars by 2050, and 53% believed ordinary people would be able to travel in space. They did, however, note that this number was actually down 13% from the survey conducted 11 years prior. Although decreasing, it was still a dominant belief in contemporary American ideology that we would conquer Mars, and I think that is more than reflected in The Martian. But that does raise one question. What about now? The Martian is coming up on its 10-year anniversary, and yet the number of hard science fiction films since have dwindled drastically. Gone are the days of Gravity, Interstellar, and The Martian, and since the release of Ad Astra in 2019, there hasn't really been a mainstream American hard science fiction film. Could it be because the closer we get to putting men on Mars, the harder we realize it is? Or has a certain somebody destroyed all hope for an expansionist future into the stars? In a 2023 study by Pew Research, they found only 11% of Americans thought it should be NASA's top priority to send human astronauts to Mars, down 7% from a similar study in 2018. There are many reasons this could be the case, but to me it seems that in recent years, focus has shifted greatly. Private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin have become increasingly more involved in spacefaring efforts. Spearheaded by rich billionaires, could it be that they believe in using their money for the betterment of mankind, or is this just another avenue for profit? This new development leaves poorly informed, hardly researched businessmen at the forefront of media interviews, able to promise and promise and promise on things they can't deliver on. In conclusion, hard science fiction films use imagined futures to present a hopeful, united view of technology and space. These movies flourish in times of technological optimism, and work to and succeed in inspiring people to look towards the stars. However, in more recent times, the commercialization and privatization of the space industry has left a much more fearful dominant ideology where these films do not get made. And hey, maybe we'll end up with humans on Mars in 10 years. Or maybe, 100 years will pass, and all we'll have to show for it is a ring of rich people floating around in space.